Hi, Lauren Bercuson.
Hello there.
So nice to see you, have you in this space. For anybody who does not know who are you today?
So today I am a podcast interviewee.
Yes, you are.
Um, so I'm Lauren. I am a mom of two boys. I'm an attorney, a copywriter, and I'm also actually a school librarian currently, and a kids book blogger, a writer. So I kind of do a lot of stuff, a lot of
I love
different
it.
things.
I love it.
Yes.
I'm curious, what made you decide to get into law?
So I've always been a more of a creative person. When I was younger, I always wanted to write. And of
Mhm.
course, my parents were like, "Well, do you want to make money when you're a grown up, or do you not want to make money?"
And you're like,
So
"I
I was like,
don't. I
"Well,
just wanna do what
I
I love."
mean, you're
Exactly.
right. I just wanted to do what I love, but I also was like, okay, but I guess I kind of need to make some money."
Mhm.
So, I mean, I've always had dreams of becoming a famous author for children, but it's very hard to make it in that world. So I figured, all right, well, if I go to law school and become a lawyer, I'll be writing and I'll be reading a lot. And so my dad's an entertainment attorney. I didn't want to go quite that exact route. So I decided to go into intellectual property law, and that's definitely more of a creative field because I'm dealing with trademarks and copyright. So the subject matter is a lot more creative and more fun and interesting.
Yeah.
So it's been a great journey.
Well, I'm really excited to have you in this space. It feels like a very palpable time to be talking about legal things while we are in a strike.
Hmm.
And so I'm really grateful to go on this journey with you um, and see what unfolds in this capacity. I have many questions in my brain, but to start, why would somebody in the creative space need to hire a lawyer?
Oh, there's a lot of reasons. Um, Obviously, the most basic is to help negotiate contracts,
Mhm.
right? Typically, someone in the creative space, whether you're an artist or an actor or an author, you are going to be getting a contract from the production company, the publishing house, whoever it is, and those contracts are essentially these big companies giving you their wish list. So the contracts that the actor or the creative professional is receiving are going to be pro these big companies. It's going to be their wish list, everything that they want.
Mhm.
So they're not really in the artist's favor all the time.
Right.
So it's very important that you don't sign anything that you don't understand, and that you are able to advocate on behalf of yourself. And obviously, a lawyer will help the creative do that better.
Yeah.
Um, in the creative industry, there's also a big issue with intellectual property. Who owns your, do you have a trademark? Do you have copyrighted work? If you're a musician and you record a piece, who owns that piece?
Mhm.
So there's just a lot of different issues. If you are in a Broadway musical and there's going to be merchandise, is your face going to be on it? And if so, are you retaining as the artist the rights? Are you owning your intellectual property? Are you owning your name, image, and likeness? So lots of different reasons. And again, each specific industry within the creative realm and within the industry and the entertainment industry is going to have its own specific nuances. So there's not really one, overarching thing that you could say about you need this, you need that in every contract or in every, situation. But a lawyer can help you navigate all of the different pieces.
Yeah. I feel like it gets, as you said, like incredibly nuanced. And now you just even think about the types of contracts that I have signed or have been given over the course of my career and how there's usually similar types of clauses, but the verbiage around all of it completely shifts as per the needs of whoever's giving me said contract. And
Exactly.
having to, you know, look through it with a fine tooth comb and be like, what is this versus what is this is, yeah, I don't have a degree in those details and those
Right.
differences. Um, if I were to go and find somebody to perhaps help me, I would imagine I'm trying to go towards one that is in the entertainment field specifically so they would know these nuances. Or is it like, cool, most lawyers, even if they aren't specifically trained in this, they have the resources and can access it, even if it's not what they deal with on the daily?
So, kind of a little bit of both. Obviously, there are lawyers that are experts in their,
Mhm.
specific fields. My dad, for instance, he is an expert in music law and recording contracts and stuff of that nature. That being said, if you wanted something, if you are going into Broadway and your face is going to be on merchandise or whatever, you might want someone who's really familiar with licensing, which many intellectual property lawyers can do. So it really, I think there's a lot of overlap
Yeah.
between the different types of law, and a contract is a contract, right?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of communication between lawyers, also in collaboration if necessary. An intellectual property attorney will really help you with, if you, let's say, someone like Matt Damon, he has his name trademarked for entertainment services. So,
Yeah.
someone, if you want to make sure, if you have a more, common name, you might want to get a trademark on your name to prevent anybody else from using that in the industry. Again, if you're a recording artist, you might want to file registrations on your songs or your writing or whatever it is. And then you would want someone that does more intellectual property work. But again, lots of overlap,
Yeah.
and lots of negotiation in all of these different fields. So it's likely that someone could help you with both. But if you
Yeah.
are very, 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 very specific questions, then sometimes it's great to go to like an expert in that exact area.
Got it. Well, let's dive on in.
Yeah.
Okay. I love examples of things or keeping things a little bit more specific so that we're not fully talking in generalizations.
Hmm.
Um, but let's say I were an unrepresented actor who does not have a manager, who doesn't have an agent. And obviously,
Hmm.
in that specific situation, my agent would be the one who would be able to negotiate said contract, whereas the manager would not.
Hmm.
Um, so I do not have anybody who is working with me in that capacity to negotiate. I receive a
Hmm.
contract and I read it. And
Hmm.
then I don't know what I don't know.
Right.
What do I do?
So I know that this is probably not the first thing that an unrepresented actor is going to want to hear, but the first tip is always going to be, if you can find a lawyer to help you
Mhm.
negotiate, um, I would always recommend that. And there's a couple of reasons for that. First, you just said you don't know what you don't know. And I remember being a baby law clerk. I clerked for an appellate court judge for about 5 years. And when I first started, there was a criminal case that came up on appeal. And I knew nothing about criminal law. I had always done intellectual property and some civil litigation. And I missed something.
Mhm.
And there was something that was relevant. I don't remember. I can't remember if it was a statute or, just important case law, but I missed it. And I was devastated because I felt like I had let down my judge. And he sat me down in his chambers and he said, Lauren, you can't know what you don't know. He
Yeah.
said, now you know about this and you know to look for it. He
Mhm.
said, but if you are in this new world and you have no experience with this exact issue, don't beat yourself up about it because you can't know what you don't know. So that's the first thing. You can look at this contract that you've just been given. You can look up the terms you don't know. You can understand every word that's in there, but you don't know if it contains everything that it should contain to
Right.
protect you, right? So the first thing I would say is, if you can get a lawyer, get a lawyer. The other reason that that's so important is that I know that for a lot of creatives, especially people that are just starting out, money can sometimes be an issue, right? I
Yeah.
know from the writing industry, which is where I'm heavily involved, but it's an issue. However, it will be a lot more costly to fight over something that didn't work out in your favor down the road than to hire someone to help you negotiate that contract and to make sure that you're super protected in the beginning. So let's say there's a provision, there's something in the contract about, when and how you can leave the show, right? And you think it's fine, but you don't really know. You didn't really consider all the nuances. And then let's say someone gets ill and you need to leave the show, but it's not necessarily, a life or death matter, but you still feel that you need to leave. Well, if you have problems getting out of the show, that legal battle or whatever is going to ensue is often going to be more costly than if you had an expert look at your contract in the beginning to just make sure that everything was fine.
Yeah.
So my first advice is always going to be to get my first bit of advice is always going to be to get, a lawyer if you can. If you can't get a lawyer, don't sign anything until you understand every word. I mean, look, I know that we all go and we lease cars and we, have people do work on our homes or we, whatever it is.
You even sign the thing that pops up that's like, you agree to these terms when you
right,
log into
exactly,
your
on
iTunes.
websites.
Yeah,
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't read them. We just sign on the dotted line, right? But when this is your contract and you're dealing with your livelihood, you want to understand every single thing in that contract. So if you don't understand, Google, ask questions, look up how to define certain terms. I mean, the internet is your best friend. It also can obviously be your worst enemy, but in situations like this, you can really learn a lot from doing your own research. Also, don't be afraid to use your voice and ask questions. You have to advocate for yourself. You can't be scared to ask for what you need. But again, I always say, make sure, and this is like my mom coming out, but make sure you're polite when you're negotiating on behalf of yourself. You don't want to, burn bridges. You don't want to ruffle feathers. There's a way to be assertive and to advocate for yourself while still maintaining your dignity and being polite and being respectful. And that is going to carry you farther than anything.
Do you have certain tips about what you have found to be towing that fine line of being assertive and also pointed about what it is that you need while also being respectful, especially for women, especially for marginalized folks, especially for folks who are usually not able to take up space in the same kind of way?
Right. It's funny you say that because I remember being in a courtroom when I was younger for a mock trial. And it was before students, and the students were all like, oh, she did awesome. They were giving critiques at the end. And the judge, who was this old white man, basically told me to be careful because I was borderline the B word, he said. And I was like,
wow.
If I was a man, no one would have said that
Not
to
a
me.
question.
Not a question. I mean, I think a lot of it is common sense. Polite and being polite and using your manners and being respectful without being, pardon my language, without being an asshole. I mean, we all know the difference, right?
Yeah.
You know how to have a polite conversation. You know how to ask for what you need in a way that comes across as honest and authentic without sounding like a jerk.
Yeah.
And I think, tone of voice, even when you, saying please, saying thank you. I mean, it sounds so basic, but a lot of it is basic. It's just a matter of, you don't need to, showboat and put on these airs and just try to be so standoffish. You're much more effective if you just maintain your respect, ask for what you need, be polite, and go from there. But it's really, I think, a matter of just basic decorum. But a lot of people don't have that.
Well, I think I see it both sides too, right? Because it's there's the let me be polite. Thank you so much. Here's what I need. Here's what I'm asking for. I'd love some clarification on this. Can you, please tell me what this actually means or whatever. There's a way to do that for sure. And there's also the fear around that can also be seen as somehow difficult, even when you're just being straightforward. And it's also you want to, arguably, I know people who go the opposite direction of being way too what I would say nice, where you're just oh my God, thank you so much. This was so wonderful. Obviously you can't retone in an email, but it's just I really want to make this work. And so if I do, I'm willing to, and just you lose the grounding of this is actually what's really important. And And so how do we balance that part of the thing, right? Where it's like sometimes, yes, like you need to be respectful and you need to be kind.
Mm-hmm.
And you also need to be direct enough that they're going to take you seriously and they're not going to walk all over you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, obviously this is it, for each person, it's different and whatever,
And
but
And I think exactly what you said is exactly what you have to do, right? You don't want to go over over the top and thank you, and I'm so thrilled and I'm so excited. You don't
yeah.
want to go over the top. But the way that you just said it, thank you. This is what's extremely important to me. I would like to understand this provision a bit more. Can you explain how this works in practice? I would like to make sure that XYZ coverage is included.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate your clarification. There's a way to have those conversations where you're not being demanding. You're just saying, I would appreciate if you could clarify this. I want to ensure that I have what is dot your I's and cross your T's. I want
Yeah.
to I want to make sure I have all my ducks in a row. And I think that most people are. I mean, people that give you the contracts are typically going to expect you to come back to them,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, I think that just be assertive, but be polite as you do so.
Yeah. So with this like
Mm-hmm.
hypothetical contract that I've been given, and now I'm unable to financially afford a lawyer, and I have used Google as my assistant and my guide, and I've thoroughly read my contract. Recognizing that there are different kinds of contracts, is there
Mm-hmm.
anything that I should specifically always be looking for?
Yeah, I think that, obviously, when it comes to payment, you want to know how you're getting paid, right? Are you getting paid um, in lump sums? Are you in one lump sum? Are you getting paid in installments? That needs to be outlined clearly so that you understand. You getting paid in the beginning, you're getting paid at the end. That is extremely important. How and when you're going to get paid. Also for actors, I know that the favored nations clauses can be very important, and
Mhm.
that's not going to necessarily be a standard in the contract. So
Correct.
you want to make sure that you have negotiated that into your contract, because you want to know that you're being treated the same as other people in the similar situated positions on the show.
Mhm.
So that equal contractual treatment is important, and that's something that you would want in there.
Can you explain for
um
people who don't necessarily know what favored nations is, what that is?
Yeah, it's basically just you want a clause in your contract that says that you are getting equal contractual treatment to others on the project. So let's say maybe you're not the lead, but you're in a supporting role.
Mhm.
This would ensure that other people that are in these same supporting roles, that you're all getting the same compensation. So whether you're a white woman, whether you're a black man, whatever it is, you're getting the same equal treatment. And that's very important. And also that's helpful because, if there is a name of somebody maybe in the show that is a little bit bigger,
Mhm.
um, and that might have access to representation that you might not have, that'll help you
With
because
leverage, yeah.
yes, that'll give you leverage. So that's always, that's a great clause to have in your contract. Um, you want to make sure that again, for actors and for theater, you want to know how and when you can leave the show if
Mhm.
necessary. Another thing that a lot of people don't think about, and this is for a lot of different areas, is exclusivity. So if you are doing a show or recording for one company or whatever it is, you want to make sure that you are not giving them exclusive rights to your talent or whatever medium.
What could
You
that
might have
mean? Like, having exclusive right if I were to have that in my clause, what would that
Mhm.
mean for me?
So you would want to see, are they saying that I can't do any other shows at a different time? Or let's say I'm working during the week. Am I forbidden from working during the weekend? Let's say I'm on Broadway, all week. That's probably not the best example. So forgive me here. But let's say you're in a show that runs from Monday through Friday. every evening in Manhattan, but then you've also have an opportunity to be in a show on the weekend in Connecticut, right? I
Mhm.
don't know. You want to be able to do both if you want to be able, if you want to do both. Let's say you have a side hustle, right? Because a lot of us, a lot of creatives have side hustles in the beginning when we're getting on our feet and need to make some more money. You want to make sure that whether you're an influencer, as silly as that sound, but if you are on TikTok or if you're an influencer, you want to make sure you can maintain that stream of livelihood
Mhm.
and that you are not forbidden from doing something else on
Yeah.
the side. So those clauses are important. You want to look at merchandising. If your face or your work is going to be used in connection with swag, for lack of a
Mhm.
better word, that's a big deal. And that opens up a whole other can of worms. Who is going to own that right to
Yeah.
your name, image, and likeness? Like, you want to maintain that ownership of you,
Yeah.
right? That's you are you are your best asset,
Yeah.
especially if you're an entertainer. So those are all things that that you definitely would want to consider. That I'm thinking of off the top of my
Yeah.
head.
That last part that you mentioned is, I mean, a huge component of these strikes right now, of the studios really trying to, especially with AI, like, be able to take our faces and bodies and use them in perpetuity.
That is where a lawyer is really important,
Yeah.
because when you start getting into the merchandising and the licensing and that becomes a whole different ball game, and
Yeah.
you don't want to give up certain rights and certain intellectual property assets that you own.
Yeah.
So that's very important to be protected. And again, not every contract is gonna, have a merchandise component to it.
Yeah.
But if it does, that's something that you really want to make sure you understand and that you're protected.
I know this is um, a sticky, broader question that we will not be able to solve or get really into the weeds about. But I am curious, though, like, how you protect that. Like, how do you protect your own likeness? You just say you can't, because I know that I've read clauses that have been in contracts of mine that are like especially involved with the media part of it or the press part of it,
Mm-hmm.
which is like, we
Mm-hmm.
can then use this perhaps if we there's like a very vague way of people saying it's possible we might actually need this and we might use it, and it might not say in perpetuity, but it might say in relationship to your time frame of being in this show, or
Mm-hmm.
give dates for it. How do we protect ourselves from that? It just seems so
I mean, so if someone's
icky.
going to use your face, right?
Yeah.
Or you want to make sure that you understand exactly what products it's going to be on.
Okay.
You want to understand the duration, only for a limited run for the purposes of this show. You want to know that your face isn't going to suddenly be splashed on an advertisement for whatever company that might be related to your production company, but is not something that you're familiar with or that you're actually working on.
Yeah.
That's a misappropriation of your likeness, and that's grounds for a lawsuit.
Okay.
So I think that if there is a merchandising component, you want to understand very, very specifically how your name, image, and likeness will be used,
Yeah.
and have a specific duration and have it all laid out. You don't want it to be vague, because then they're going to try to use you for everything, and
Yeah.
that's not okay.
Yeah.
Um, so again, the more that is outlined
And specific.
and specifically
Mhm.
laid out for you, the better.
Yeah.
Anything that's vague or that doesn't really, tell you what you want to know, like how is it going to be used? Well, you want that outlined exactly.
Yeah. What about in the land now of social media
Mhm.
and people creating for themselves,
Mhm.
perhaps using material from shows that already exist, or perhaps collaborating with other collaborators who already have music or other forms of art? Like, the line of who owns what and
Mhm.
that I know that's more in the land of where you sit with like trademarking and copywriting. What is that nebulous land?
That is a very nebulous land, right?
Yeah.
So if you are in a show and you want to use a snippet of that show, of you in the show, you might not be able to,
Right.
right? Because if you don't own the copyright in the recording of that show, then you probably can't use it on your own social media. Again, all of this would likely be outlined in your contract. I would say for social, if it's your original content, you're free to use it. But you certainly cannot use something from somebody else's. Here's a perfect example. The Kardashians, right?
Right.
Kourtney Kim, who's the one that's pregnant and just held up the sign.
Oh, it is Kourtney. I think it's Kourtney.
Kourtney, the one who's married to music. Forgive me that I don't know my Kardashian lingo.
It's
But
Kourtney. It's Kourtney.
okay, so she was just at the concert.
Chloe's the other one. Yeah, it's Kourtney. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Great.
So she held up this sign, right?
Yes.
And said, like, I'm pregnant. Well, I have seen a lot of people in their social media have this photo of Kourtney holding up the sign. They've whited out whatever she had on the sign and like put something advertising their own product. You cannot do that. She owns, well, first off, there's, her name, image, and likeness. So now you're using her face to sell your own thing. You don't know who owns that photograph. So, you have to be very careful when you're taking other people's protected intellectual property and using it on your feed. So I always say, and again, I have a book blog, so I'm on Instagram a lot for that, but you have to be careful when you are creating content. If it's your own content, you're good, right? As long as you're not trying to use somebody else's trademark in it or, whatever it is. But if it's your own stuff, you're okay. When you start trying to take other people's things and you're not quite sure who owns what or who, can I post this recording or then you're going to have challenges.
Well,
that's a whole
I know,
because
I think about, so many artists, myself included, who have like taken, a cut of a song and then recorded it and put it on our socials. I have had, clips on YouTube many, many years ago, because I don't really post there at all now, but, be like, oh, we can no longer keep this up because it violates copyright because it's linked to somebody else and an artist. And it was, I think especially musical theater, when so much of the material that we're using is copywritten material. It's from other places. That's how we're auditioning for things. We're using material from other shows to audition. And I know in like today's day and age, especially with social media, that's a huge way that people are sharing what they do because they're taking other people's work and singing it or performing it. What?
It's, again, I mean, it's a huge can of worms. I mean, look, even if you make a reel on Instagram, right? You can have music that you think is okay because it's coming from Instagram, but then 2 days later, they're like, the music from your reel is gone, right?
Correct.
So a lot of people, it's different if you're putting something on your feed and you're not trying to monetize it necessarily, right? Because there is fair use of certain material.
What does that mean?
So fair use of copyrighted material means if you are reviewing something, so let's say I'm reviewing a Taylor Swift song, right? I can use the lyrics of her song and then talk about them in a way that's transformative because I'm not trying to compete with her. I'm just trying to give commentary on her music, right? That's okay.
Well, you would open yourself up to a lot of contradiction because those Swifties are Swift. But yes, I hear you.
Those Swifties can be tough, right? So if you're criticizing her, you want to be careful.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend that one as the particular lyrics that you would analyze. But
I do love some Taylor Swift, though. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
So then there's also, parody. Like if you are like Saturday Night Live, so much of that is, they're taking other people's copyrighted material and then poking fun at it or providing some kind of, humorous commentary or whatever. That's okay. So it depends on how you're trying to use it. That's a very good question. If you're auditioning for something and you're using somebody else's song and you put a video on your Instagram, that I need to find out. I think that that would be okay because you're not selling anything with that.
Yeah.
But that's a good question. I'm off the top of my head, I'm not quite sure,
I
but I want
know.
to find out about that. I'll get back to you.
Yeah, it's a slippery slope,
Mhm.
and up until this point, that I think has been most of the norm. The amount of
Mhm.
friends of mine that have posted themselves, singing clips from shows or other art
Mhm.
recording artists and using that on their social media and on their websites as samples of their work. That is just
Mhm.
kind of what has been in the zeitgeist thus far. But I think
Right.
there is a real shift now with content creation and TikTok specifically and social media being a short form video that is
Mhm.
able to monetize your talent in a very different
Ex-
way. That shift, I mean, I think we're like asking these questions as we're probably in process of navigating what is going to come of it, if I had to guess.
Exactly. And there's a big difference between using something for your portfolio, right?
Mhm.
Where you're not necessarily monetizing yourself, but you're showing it to others as a sample of your work versus you using a song that you sang in your, let's say you're singing I Feel Pretty and
Mhm.
you're using it in connection with trying to, put lipstick on and you're trying to like sell the brand, right? So
Interesting. Yeah.
that's a different story because you're singing a song and you're trying to sell lipstick in connection with the song that you don't own and you're trying to monetize what you're doing.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to make money from something, which a lot of influencers and content creators are, there's a very fine line between, using something for your portfolio.
I guess that is the shift though, right? The shift can be now though, like I could post a video of an audition that I used material from, and then because it's lived online for so long or gained traction, then I am getting paid for that. My intention around it was not to be paid. It was simply to share and be used as part of my portfolio in theory.
Right.
But now it's actually making me money. And again, I'm bringing up these things as things that I'm worried about. I'm not posting content that is of me performing in this capacity. That's not my lane at the moment, at least, nor do I
Right.
anticipate it being, but it's not my lane. But I have so many friends that they are going down that route in the content creation world, which is so incredible. And just, I guess for me, I'm hopeful and worried for them.
This whole social media content creation, AI, it's so fast and furious with things changing every day
Yeah.
that I always say to friends and fellow influencers and fellow bloggers, if you are the slightest bit hesitant because you're not sure, err on the side of caution
Hmm.
until you have someone help you figure it out and
Yeah.
figure out if it's legal or not. And
Yeah.
that's always, go with your gut. um
Yeah.
that's always my first thought.
How does somebody know that they're at the point that they need to trademark something, their name? When do you know that this is the journey that one might want to go down?
I think if let's say you have a side hustle and you are starting a small business, whether you're coaching or you're selling, small products that you're creating or, whatever it is, you always, always, always want to make sure that nobody else is using your name.
Mhm.
And if you have a business that you do think could be profitable and you're selling around the country, um, trademarking is always a good idea because let's say your company blows up, right? And you didn't file a trademark, and then someone comes after you and files and starts a company for similar goods or services and their name is confusingly similar to yours, right? If they file the trademark first, then you are going to have to legally fight them because if you're not in the trademark system at the Patent and Trademark Office, if you haven't filed an application, get they'll get a registration, even though you were using the mark first. So you're going to then have to go to the PTO. You're going to have to fight them for the mark. And that's a whole other, legal battle and a whole waste of resources that you wouldn't have to waste essentially if you had done a trademark in the beginning.
And that's
Um,
different than, say, you protecting your business by having an LLC or an S corp, correct?
Yes, having an LLC or an S corp does not give you trademark registration rights. There could be a million companies with similar business names. Having an Instagram account with your name, having a Threads account, a Twitter account, does not give you legal rights to that name. The only way that you get legal rights to the name is if you have a trademark registration with the Patent and Trademark Office.
And that could be just for your name, or is it for the
You
product,
could
or both?
actually, you could have well, it depends how like what mark you're using. For instance, let's go back to our Matt Damon example, because I know he has a trademark on his name.
Are we going to get sued for using his name? Is this going to happen here?
No, we're educating.
Great.
So he has a mark for his name in connection with entertainment services, right? So if your name is Matt Damon or Matt, Feynman, and you come along and you want to be an actor, well, you might want to go under a different name because you're going to have trouble because he owns the mark. He has the rights to use that name and prevent any confusion. I mean, look at like Michael Jordan and Michael Jordan.
Yeah.
Remember,
Michael Jordan and Michael B. Jordan. Mm-hmm.
Right. So I've never actually looked that up, but I'd be curious if Michael B. Jordan is the young actor,
Correct.
Right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
He probably has to use Michael B. Jordan to prevent confusion with Michael Jordan.
I also imagine if I had to guess too, Michael Jordan, again, this is totally hypothesized, who knows, but I imagine he's been in enough on-camera things that in SAG-AFTRA land, he's actually like in the system with his name already, and you can't have somebody else who has your same exact name in the system. I wonder if that's part of it too.
That I don't know. I'm not familiar with those exact rules, but possibly, quite possibly. So you can trademark your name. You wouldn't trademark necessarily Jennifer Apple in connection with a podcast, but you would trademark Jennifer Apple in connection with your entertainment services, right? And you could trademark Empowered Artists Collective in connection with a podcast. So it just depends on what you are doing and how you're doing it and what goods and services you offer. And then, same goes for copyright. Like once you write a song, once you record a piece of music or write a book, you have copyright protection in and to that work because you are the one who physically wrote that creative work. However, if someone infringes upon that work, right?
Meaning what?
Meaning they copy it. Right.
Okay.
So let's say someone takes your song, they see your words somewhere, and then they sell it to somebody else. Right. And all of a sudden someone's using your song. You couldn't sue them unless you had an actual copyright registration.
For your name or for this song?
For that piece of work.
So every single time you create something, you have to copyright it? Isn't that like a crazy dangerous situation?
You do not have to file for a registration. However, so you have copyright protection the second that you create a work. Okay. If you need to somehow bring in action, let's say you need to send a cease and desist letter to someone because someone's using your mark or someone's using your work, then you need to have a copyright registration. So then there's another fine line. What do you want to register? How often should you register? Some people will register for every song they write, every book they write. So it's just,
Can I ask what that costs?
So for filing a copyright registration, it's like $200 or $300 to file the application. That's the government filing fee. And then typically an attorney will charge you a flat fee, and it's not a few $100s to prepare the application. It's not really very labor intensive. For a trademark application, it's the same thing. I want to say it's about $325 per class. So let's say you want to file Jennifer Apple in connection with entertainment services. Let's say that's one class. And then let's say you want to
let's say for my coaching, I wanted it
for your coaching, right? I'm blanking on what class that would be in, but there are likely two different classes. That would be considered a 2-class application. So your government filing fee would be whatever it was, the $325, $375, $350 per class, plus the attorney's fee. So I would probably charge to prepare that application, because I'm more flexible than like a big box law firm since I'm an independent practitioner. I would probably charge a flat fee of like $500 to get the application, to prepare it all, and then to file it. And then the government fees would be, however much for however many. It would be determined by how many classes you're filing in.
And it's only by state, or you have to protect yourself across the states, or you do it by state and it's just where you
So
live?
if let's say you're only selling in Florida, you're only doing something in Florida, you could get away with just filing a state trademark application. But what I'm talking about is a U.S.
Got it.
Federal trademark registration. So if you're coaching services and you have a website and you're coaching clients all over the country, then you want a federal registration.
Got it. Got it. And so
Mm-hmm.
the time frame from you filing to getting approved could take how long?
That's a good question. It's actually running really late right now.
That's not surprising. Come on.
I
Why? Are there
know,
other
I
things
know.
going on in the government that need our attention? What do you mean?
I know, right? I mean, shocker.
Yeah.
But right now, I think the applications are taking anywhere from like 10 months to a year to a little bit longer. And that's with no issues. So let's say they think your mark is confused or is descriptive, or it's confusingly similar to another mark, then you're going to have to respond to office actions and you're going to have to explain why. So there's a whole process. But again, if you are starting a small business, or if you have a small business, you're always better off getting that protection and nailing it down in the beginning, because you don't want to have to go after somebody who started using the mark after you but got the registration before you. Does that make
Got it.
sense?
Yeah, for sure. It's just such an interesting thing because it's like for performers specifically, or if I just think about, myself, it's like I am my
Right.
product.
Right.
Like, anything that I perform in, anytime that I am coaching, like these two hats specifically, like I am that thing.
Right.
So it feels somehow strange to be like protecting me. Like, I mean, I know that's the whole point of it, but that
Yeah. Look,
it's
some of these artists get insurance on their body parts, right?
yeah.
It's the same kind of idea. And again, it might not be necessary to trademark your actual name yet.
Mhm.
There are many actors and actresses who probably have not trademarked their actual
For
name, who don't
sure.
have an actual registration, because if someone starts using a name, or if someone comes along, and trying to use a fake name that's similar, you can kind of be like, hey, stop, right?
Yeah.
Or in the field, people are going to want to be their own name, right? So
Yeah.
how many John Smiths are there that are, huge in the acting world? Maybe a few, I don't know.
I don't know
But
either.
your name is going to be typically a little bit more unique.
Yeah.
So,
As we begin to wind down our time, what else should I have asked you?
ooh.
What else, if I am an artist, a performer specifically, an actor, somebody in the creative space, um, what else would behoove me to know when it comes to contracts, when it comes to protections, when it comes to advocating, negotiating?
I think I just can't reiterate enough, because so many people sign things every day that they just kind of sign and don't read, that the only thing that I would stress again, even though I've kind of already said it, is do not sign anything that you do not understand. Do not sign anything without reading it. So I guess you could have asked me, hey, well, what if I think I know what I'm talking about? But
Mhm.
should I proceed? Should I not? If you think you understand it, but you're not sure, get help. Do your research, get a lawyer if you can, talk to friends in the industry who have signed similar contracts, maybe even someone that's has a little more leverage than you do, like a mentor.
Mhm.
But I can't stress that enough, because especially when you are the asset and you are, this is your livelihood, you just want to protect yourself as much as you can. And there's nothing more important than that.
Yeah. Thank you for all of this. The interesting part again is like, we're in a strike right now where many contracts will not be signed.
Hmm.
So I think this is a really helpful conversation so that people can get ducks in a row for when things hopefully do pick back up. And,
Mm-hmm.
if this is a topic that people are interested in learning more about, or if they want to work with you, where can people find you? What are some helpful tools or resources that you might have to share with people? How can people stay in touch or ask more questions? All of that.
Absolutely. I'm on Instagram at LB Legal Creative. You can send me a message there. You can connect with me. You can connect with me on Threads. I would be happy to offer anyone, especially with the strike going on. And I know a lot of people are probably trying to figure out other creative ways to make money. If anyone wants to talk to me about, influencer agreements, sponsored content agreements, anything like that, I'm happy to give like a free 20-minute consultation if someone just wants to say that they saw me on your podcast.
Mm-hmm.
You can either send me a direct message, or my website is lblegalcreative.com. You can find me on there. There's like a project request form on there. And we can set something up. If I don't know if it actually just says consultation as one of the things you can check, but just check something and then write Empowered Artists Collective in the subject. And I'm happy to talk about that. But those are the two places that you can find me right now. If you have children by chance and want to find the best books for your kids, you can find me by my other face is Happily Ever Elephants, where I blog all things kids books. So if someone's in the industry and in the writing world, you may have heard of me through that domain.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like my little side creative gig because I love writing. But those are the places where you can find me.
Thank you so much for having this conversation with me. And
Of
I
course.
know it was perhaps in some ways like I wouldn't call it surface based in any way, but like it's so hard to get into the specifics when you don't have the specifics in front of you. So I appreciate you being willing to live in the nebulousness of the hypotheticals, while
Right.
still talking about things that are important, and for offering your services to folks in this community. I know people
Absolutely.
have often reached out to me to be like, hey, I know you did this contract. Who did you use? And then we all kind of help each other. And I really do believe that this industry is stronger when we help each other. And so thank you for being a resource for us artists, as we navigate difficult things. So
Of
I
course.
appreciate
Of
you.
course. I get it. And I am here to help however I can. And I love this opportunity. This was
Yeah.
so great. Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you for being here.